So with more and more manufacturers producing turbocharged engines, a lot of people have just been asking me how to properly drive a turbo. So there are some differences between a turbocharged engine and a naturally aspirated engine. The key thing really is the way the power is delivered. In this video, we're just going to look at some things that we should be doing at the start and end of our journey to maximize the lifespan and the reliability of our turbocharger, but also some general driving techniques to just make sure that we're able to stay in the power band. The turbocharger uses a series of turbines. It's driven by exhaust gases, and as the turbine on the exhaust side spools up, it spools up the turbine on the intake side, and that pulls lovely, fresh, compressed air into the engine, or pushes it into the engine, I should really say. Now, as a consequence of that mechanism, if the RPM is low, the turbocharger is not going to be producing enough boost. And this is a condition known as turbo lag. Not only does the turbine from the exhaust side spin more slowly because the exhaust gas flow is low, they're also made of metal. There's inertia. It takes a little while for them to pick up speed. Start up and the cool down. Now, things have come a long way. In days gone by, when the engine was hot, there will be no oil circulating through the turbo when you shut it off. There'll also be no coolant. And turbochargers get pretty hot. They're working on the exhaust side of the engine, so there's a lot of temperature in there. And it's very easy for the oil that's stuck inside the turbo to exceed the manufacturer's specifications. And quite a few engines that I've worked on have had sludge problems due primarily to the fact that the turbocharger has cooked the oil and turned it into sludge. The 1.8 turbo and a lot of the Volkswagen Group engines are subject to this sludge build-up on those early engines if we didn't allow it a chance to properly cool down after a spirited drive. With a modern engine though, you often got electric water pumps. The oil and the coolant is circulated after you shut the engine off. You can hear these mechanisms whirring around. Often the fans are still going when you shut the engine off. But a little bit of mechanical sympathy does go a long way. And if we can just bear in mind that the engine needs a little bit of time to cool down after a spirited drive. Now, in most cases, that may just mean going a little slower for the last mile or so of our journey as we approach home or as we approach work. When I say slower, I mean engine speed rather than the actual speed of the car. If we can keep the RPM down a little, it just allows everything to properly circulate and properly cool down. Now, a lot of people will argue that that is completely unnecessary on the modern engine, but it still helps to prolong the life of the engine if we're just conscious of that shutdown period and allowing the turbocharger specifically to cool down. And if we've not done any particularly spirited driving, it probably doesn't matter that much because the turbocharger has not got particularly hot. On startup, it's the reverse really. We need to allow time for everything in the engine to warm up. The metal components in the engine need to expand and fit the manufacturer's specifications for the tolerances. You get a lot more blow-by. That's the gap between the piston and the wall of the cylinder. And that, generally speaking, closes up significantly when the engine is warm. Now, modern engines are built with tighter tolerances, so that is less of an issue now than it used to be. But the oil does require a little bit of heat to properly meet the viscosity requirements of lubricating the engine. And it takes a few seconds as well for the oil pressure to build up. Obviously, depending on how the engine has been designed, it will affect the length of time it takes to get up to oil pressure and to get up to temperature. But certainly for most cars, specifically turbocharged cars, we don't want to do any hard driving for the first couple of minutes as an absolute minimum. A lot of cars will take significantly longer than a couple of minutes to warm up, particularly in those winter months. And we just need to be aware of the oil temperature. And in that warm-up period, we want to be extremely gentle when the engine is very cold, and we need to increase the RPM and the load on the engine a little as the engine warms up. And only when the engine is particularly warm should we be exploring the upper 2/3 of the RPM range. This gives a chance for the oil inside the turbo to meet the viscosity and do this lubrication thing inside the turbo. And we need to bear in mind that those components in the turbo are spinning at very high speeds. Lubrication is very critically important. As soon as the turbo starts to fail, you'll notice it's not producing power smoothly. It's struggling to spool up. It may even be making whining or sirening noises, and they are signs that the turbocharger is failing. And it is often down to oil problems, lubrication problems, and improper startup and cool down procedures. The power band. Every car has got a very, very specific power band. This is really where the car delivers peak torque and peak HP. It's usually measured on a dyno graph, and it's the point between peak bhp and peak torque. And generally speaking, that is where you get the most power. And the trick of driving a turbocharged car is to try and keep the RPM in that sweet little bracket. So when we change up a gear or down a gear, we need to be thinking about what the RPM is going to be when we hit that new gear. Just make sure that we're still in the power. It's very, very easy on a turbocharged engine, particularly these smaller capacity modern turbocharged engines, to get out of the power band and start to experience lag. If you've ever tried to pull away in the wrong gear, you get away with it in a naturally aspirated engine. But in a turbocharged engine, it will really struggle to pull the car. And that would be a condition known as lugging, which is not particularly good for the engine. And that's something that we've discussed in a previous video. The way that we use the accelerator also matters in a turbocharged engine. In an naturally aspirated engine, you can pretty much use the accelerator as a binary pedal on and off. And it didn't matter too much. You got a little bit of wheel spin. But with a turbocharger, thinking about the physics of how the turbocharger spools up and the delivery of the exhaust gases and the delivery of the power is much better for the lifespan of the engine, and also for a smooth power delivery to graduate the throttle rather than just go full bore instantly. Build it up, go from a third to 2/3 to maximum throttle, but do that in a progressive way. So as the turbine spins up and produces more power, you can capture that power with a little more throttle. And that matches really the delivery of fuel to the air that's going into the engine. Obviously, the ECU is going to do a lot of the work for you, but you're not going to be backing off because you're demanding too much throttle input and there's not enough air going into the engine at that specific point. It also reduces wear and tear on all the components in the turbocharger. You've got a wastegate, a blow-off valve, a diverter valve, a turbo actuator. All these mechanisms are subject to wear and tear. And unfortunately, a lot of manufacturers have used plastic components in these, and they're prone to split or fail prematurely. And one of the ways that we can just prolong the life of these components is this progressive throttle control. So we're feeding the power in and the car is just gradually accelerating. If you can think of anything that I've missed off on this video, please let me know in the comments. I love hearing your comments. I learn a lot from you guys. So I really do appreciate all of the feedback and comments that we get on these videos. And if you could just boot that like button, that really does help us to get out there. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe to the channel. That again helps the algorithm to pick up on us and recommend us to a few more people, and you won't miss out on the great content that we've got planned on this channel. Thanks for watching, and I've lined up this video and this playlist for you that you should find really interesting. Thanks for watching. See you in this next video.